I've been doing a bit of renovation in the shop over the past year, and now it's time to tackle a part of the shop that has been sort of neglected so far, and that is the area behind me. So far this space has just been a kind of a mess, but now I want to build two things that I really missed having in the woodshop. The first thing is a proper lumber storage, specifically for longer material, but also for bigger and smaller sheets of plywood. The second thing is something that I think is kind of underrated, that I think every woodshop should have, especially if you're going to build some bigger stuff, and that is a level and flat floor. On the entire floor here, there is this drainage or drains, so there's no part of this floor that is level or flat, and that can lead to some real problems if I am, for instance, building a bigger dining table. So I can build it here, but because this floor isn't flat, when you then put the dining table into a flat floor in a house, it can wobble and get uneven. So that is what I'm doing in this video, and also this is a perfect project to test this DTX10 3-in-1 digital measuring tape that the guys at ACG Met sent me. They are also sponsoring this video, and throughout this build I'm going to show you some of the features of this handy little tool. Okay, so the plan for the floor is to have the floor framing going in this direction. I'm going to use 2x4 to do that, and then we're going to have the plywood in the other direction. Okay, so now I want to calculate how much material I'm going to need, and we can actually do that using the ACG Met. And one of the three functions of this measuring tape is, of course, the normal measuring tape, but we also have a laser. I'm just going to take a quick measurement over here. 6.275 meters. You can switch this to feet and inches as well if you want to, but I use metric. I can also use this to calculate how much plywood I'm going to need. So if I click on this button here, you get to all of the tools, and I'm going to go into this S, the one that says S, square meters. Then I'm going to go over and use the laser to get this measurement first, and I'm going to measure across as well. And it's going to calculate first. So we have the first measurement, then the one across, and then the C is the circumference, so all of the sides added up together. And the fourth one is the square meters of the room. So 29.6 square meters. I know that one sheet of plywood is around 2.9 square meters. So we're going to need exactly 10 sheets of plywood here. And then we're going to add one more just in case I make a mistake. So 11 sheets of plywood for this room.
Okay, so I started by laying out the rim joists and attaching them to the wall using some expansion nails. I used the SDS drill to drill the holes, and the expansion nails were 10 millimeters thick. I wanted the floor to be as low as possible, so in some of the corners I had to cut off a little bit of the 2x4 in order to get them the right height. I had quite a lot of leftover 2x4s, and I want to use as much of that as possible. Now unfortunately these were not long enough to go all the way across, so I had to add another joist down the middle. I marked out where the joists would go and started to screw them in place. Some of these were a bit twisted, so I had to throw away some of them, and I cut a bunch of these 2x4 pieces and added them all over the floor. These have two functions. Firstly, you can use them to adjust the height of the floor to make sure it's all level, and I used a laser to check this. Also, they are great for giving support to the floor to make sure you don't end up with a giant trampoline. Finally, I added blocking to give extra support under the edge of the plywood. I also added some insulation in one of the corners. That is because I plan on building a closet for the dust collector here, and I want it to be as soundproof as possible. I could have added insulation on the entire floor, but that wouldn't really make sense, as the rest of the floor does not have insulation. And finally, I could start installing the plywood, and once again I'm using this cheap defected plywood that I've used before. These are only $20 to $25 per sheet, so they are a lot cheaper than regular plywood. A lot of you guys have been asking me where I buy these, and I am Norwegian, so I buy them from a local lumberyard here in Norway. For you fellow Vikings here in Norway, I buy them at Optimera or Bygvel. Try asking for pakkeplate. I wanted to have a way to move bigger things like my planer and jointer up and down from the floor without having to lift it. So I built this little ramp that will help me to do that. And in order to find the angle for the plywood on this ramp, I used the digital tape measure. It has a spirit level function as well. So you can see this little number at the top. It shows you the angle of whatever surface you're measuring. I put this on the ramp and it showed 6 degrees. So I put 6 degrees on the track saw and made the cut. The opposite edge of the plywood would have to be 84 degrees, and you can't really do that on a track saw, so I made it as steep as possible, which is 45 degrees. And then my nephew, who is both a policeman and a building inspector according to himself, came to test the ramp. And luckily, after some careful consideration, he approved.
So the floor has now been sanded with 120 grit. I have cleaned it and vacuum cleaned it, and now we're ready for some paint. Okay, so we got the laser, you've got the spirit level, and then the third one in the 3-in-1 is the tape measure. You can use the tape measure as just a normal tape measure, but you can also look at the display to see how far out the tape measure is. And you can decide if you want to measure from this edge, or you can just click this button twice and you measure from the back. Another cool thing is that you can clear the measurements. So let's say you're going to put a mark every 17 centimeters for some reason. So you're going to pull this out until it is at 17 centimeters. Then you can clear that, put it at 0, pull out until you have 17 centimeters again, and keep going like that. Instead of having to calculate and add up 17 plus 17 plus 17 and so on. So there are quite a few cool features on this tool. Okay, so the floor is done, and now I can move on to the lumber storage / workbench area. So the plan is to have storage for sheets of plywood and also scrap wood here in the lower part. And then over the window, I'm gonna have storage for longer material. And for the very long material, we can go over the door as well. Now the storage for the plywood only needs to go from the door to the window, so there's no need to cover up this area. I'm just going to leave that open, and I want to have a workbench under the window here, and that will be perfect for my laser cutter. So we got some material, got some 2x4s and some 1.5x3s and some plywood, and we're ready to go.
After I had painted everything, I installed this workbench using an old bench top I had laying around. I finished it with Osmo wax, and finally I installed the trim around the windows, and my new floor and lumber storage / workbench area was done.
I am super excited and happy about how this turned out. It's so nice to have a flat, level floor, and it also makes access to the door a bit easier. If I've built something that's a bit large and heavy, it's a lot easier to get it out on the trailer now. And also for the lumber storage, it has a lot of storage, and I love that it's not very visible from the front here. Underneath here, I'm gonna have to do something for the plywood scraps, but I haven't decided yet if I'm going to build like a lumber cart or just some shelves on the side here. I also love the workbench area. It's very nice to have a dedicated workbench for the laser, and of course I can sit here and do some computer work as well. And of course there's going to be like a closet for the dust collector over in this corner. And so now the question is the DTX 10 3-in-1 digital tape measure. Do you, as a woodworker, need to have one of these? No, you don't. You don't need to have one of these. I'm just going to be completely honest. When I'm doing woodworking stuff and making furniture, I'm not going to use this a whole lot. The only reason I would use it is for the tape measure, but I'm going to use one of my smaller tape measures for that. However, for work like this, construction work with bigger lumber and bigger dimensions, this is great. This is a great tool to have, and I'm definitely going to use it. Now, this is a great tool. It's very accurate. For woodworking, furniture making, you're not really going to need it, but for construction work, and if you're just the kind of guy who likes gadgets and likes cool tools, I can highly recommend it. It's a great tool, very accurate, and very fun. If you want to check this out, I will put a link down in the description. And if you want to build some furniture, outdoor furniture or indoor furniture, check out my Etsy store, rbaloniwoodworking.etsy.com. I'm moving all my plans over to Etsy right now. I'll still have my old website, rbaloni.com, but I think that by using Etsy, it's going to bring in more sales for the woodworking plans. Check the link in the description if that sounds interesting to you. If you want to see a cool outdoor lounge chair with a pull-out footrest that I made, you can check out this video.